Frank,
Dynamite.
Frank, come on, man. Can I Be Frank is all about capturing real, authentic, unedited conversation. Hi, this is podcast number 35. It's with a guy called Monty Wates. Monty Wates is a filmmaker that has recently completed a documentary called Magic Medicine. I got in touch with Monty through Twitter and asked him would he be interested in doing it, and he obviously said yes. And the movie Magic Medicine is basically follows the very first trials of psilocybin, which is the active ingredient magic mushrooms, but the very first trials in the UK with patients that were suffering from untreatable depression. So it's a thing that I'm really interested in. This whole use of psychedelics for therapeutic use and care, I think is just interesting. So I'm going to show the ad next for the film, and then the podcast is an hour long. There's a few tiny little sound things. But anyway, check it out. Check out the website, which is magicmedicine.net. And yeah, thank you very much.
What I've always been desperate to do is to find a physical reason for feeling this way. The anxiety, the fear, the panic. For the past 30 years, I've had 30 different types of medication, and none have worked. I need to find a way to change.
LSD swung the doors wide open for research into psychoses.
I think psychedelics has the potential to revolutionize depression treatment, if not psychiatry. This is the psychoactive ingredient in so-called magic mushrooms.
Thousands of people who could benefit from these drugs are denied access.
Just a small improvement would be lovely. Just for him to see the world through a different pair of eyes.
This could be the start of a new life.
Somebody could have one of the most profound experiences of their whole lives in here.
No. Please go away.
He was taken back to a very, very difficult memory.
Imagine a nightmare that lasts for 6 hours and doesn't stop.
People can go through their whole lives without ever really facing those demons.
This was the big ride. This is the one that changed things.
Depression's so prevalent. Everyone's exposed to it.
Whatever the problem is, it will take you straight to that. You have to decide there and then whether you're going to be a victim of that for the rest of your life or not.
It made me think, well, perhaps I'm not just a passenger on this merry-go-round.
Is that a beautiful experience, would you say?
I would say yes.
About, or where did it come about, really, I suppose?
So Lizzie, who's the executive producer, read an article in the Evening Standard, which is a free newspaper in London, and rang me immediately and said we should make this film. We weren't working together. The last time that we had worked together was 15 years previously, or 16 years previously in New Zealand. Okay. But we both have worked in TV on and off in our lives, and so she said we should go and see these guys. And then luckily she knew a guy called Rick Adams, who knew Robin, who was the guy running the trial. Yeah. And very kindly sent Robin an email.
On the Evening Standard, you saw an article about.
Yeah, it was an article about. I don't even know what the article was about anymore. I don't know if it was about the actual trial that was happening or about the LSD trial that they did with brain scans. I think it must have been about the actual trial, because Lizzie was saying that we should make a film about this. So maybe they were looking for people to volunteer on the trial or something like that.
So this is for people's, just a brief 2 seconds, this is for people who are suffering with depression, who have been untreatable depression, and that the article said that there's going to be a trial and they're going to take psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms.
Yeah. I mean, if that's what the article was, fine. It was definitely an article about Robin and about the work that he was doing, and it must have mentioned the trial, because Lizzie rang me and said, you know, we should try and speak to Robin and make this and make a film about this trial. You know, use magic mushrooms, and the medical trial to use magic mushrooms. There's absolutely no way that they're going to say, yes, you can come in and film it. That would be completely off the charts as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
But this guy, Rick Adams, introduced us and sent a nice email to Robin saying that, you know, if you are thinking of making a film about this, then these guys, they're trustworthy, you know, they're not going to screw you over, kind of thing. And so Robin got us in and had a chat. We said that we're really interested in making this film, but we're not going to make a puff piece for you. We're not going to just, you know, we're going to film what we see, and that's what the film's going to be. And we, you know, if we get any sense that you're going to try and manipulate us or affect the way that we do things and not allow us to interview people and whatever it is, or not allow us to tell a true story that, as we see it, then that's going to be a real problem for us. And so we just, you know, we won't do it, kind of thing. And actually, David and Robin both said, yeah, that's fine. I think that's a good way of doing things. And then they were completely true to their word throughout the whole thing. When we first went to see them, they said no, not right now. And we thought that was just a no for good. And then after they'd done the first 12 patients out of the 20, they realized that the results were good and it was all looking good and they were happy with their processes. And so Robin called us back in and said, we're interested. And by then there were only 5 people left who hadn't taken their first dose. And it was important for me that we film people before their first dose. So we sent a little video message that we recorded on our iPhone, Lizzie and I, so, you know, saying what our motivations were and that sort of thing. And Robin forwarded it to the 5 people who were left, and 3 of them said yes. So we started filming. I mean, almost like the day after they said yes, because they were going in for their first dose within a few days. So I had to get out of Scotland sort of within 24 hours, basically.
Wow. Okay. So it was very much, because it's interesting. I saw an article in the Independent, the UK Independent, and I think it's this cool picture of Robin with an injection, and then it was something like the first scientist in 50 years going to test LSD. And I actually I was writing a book of fiction at the time, and I integrated that into the book. But I actually was kind of blown away by it because, and that's why I did that, even that 30-minute piece that I sent on to, I was genuinely blown away because maybe in my naiveness and how not questioning things when I was being brought up, but everything I had learned growing up was you're one step away from an insane asylum if you take LSD or if you take a psychedelic. That was totally my impression.
Yeah, I mean, I that's exactly the same thing as I had. You know, I'd had friends that had experienced it, and a lot of them had you know, funny laughing times, and some of them had these terrible bad trips. And so for me, that connection between the drug that takes you out of your head and puts you somewhere else, kind of thing, or so it seemed, and treating depression was so intriguing. That as soon as Lizzie sent me the article, I was like, you know, that I just want to understand that kind of thing, and that's a good reason to make a film.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting that you took it from the perspective of the patients, because there, you see, and I loved how you said at the start there, in terms of your talking with Robin and David, that you were kind of saying you were kind of skeptical in a way, or you approached it from the skeptic's perspective, because it's still a drug and everything that we've ever learned is X. And so then for Y to be true, you really have to kind of find out for definite if it's true.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that we simply didn't know I didn't understand it, and so I think I'd say I was completely neutral, and that was the way that I approached the whole film was, okay, so what is being presented? What am I seeing in front of me? How do I interpret that? As opposed to, right, I've got this idea about what the sort of film should be like. Let's go and find footage to back up that idea. And so, you know, it was lovely going out, and I made a film for TV probably 10 years before, 5 years before making this film, with someone called Penny Woolcock, who's an absolute legend in the documentary world. And I remember asking her one day, one of the first days that I was filming with her, I was her cameraman, she was directing, and we were filming kids, homeless, film about homeless people in London. And I said to her, so what are we going to do today? And she turned around to me with this sort of like real shock and look on her face. And she went, well, I don't know what we're going to do today. How can I possibly know what we're going to do today? Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what these people are going to say to me, and we don't know kind of, you know, anything about the day. So we're just going to turn up and see what happens. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a really interesting way to make a documentary, because working in TV, it's like, here's what you're going to do today. You know, everything is completely laid out. You need them to cry at 3 o'clock. You need them to have a resolution at 4:40. You know, it was literally sort of like you were painting by numbers sort of thing. So it was very refreshing to hear that actually documentaries could be made another way. And that's exactly how I made this documentary.
Yeah, okay. You were involved in faking it. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, that was a sort of slightly good version of.
Well, that was actually one of my favorite It's probably one of my favorite documentaries ever. Really.
Yeah. But it was still quite constructed. You know, so there was still this sense that, you know,
happy ending.
Yeah, well, certainly a happy ending. That was sort of heavily geared, but you know, sort of throughout it, you need that. You know, they need certain things to happen. So, you know. First of all, you set them up as hopeless individuals who haven't got a chance. Then they think that they're doing really well, and then they need to have a bad experience that brings their confidence right down again. And then you bring their confidence back up again, and they win, and it's bloody great kind of thing. But it was just completely like, this is what we need to see kind of thing. It wasn't right. Let's film this really interesting situation and just see what happens. That wasn't allowed, because they needed the drama to happen, and so therefore that drama was often forced. Whereas filming something like On the Streets, which is the documentary with Penny, you know, she just filmed for 6 months, and you know, and you make the film that is presented to you, kind of thing.
You're capturing.
I think a far more honest way of making.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the other is almost fitting it into the arc of the story. Even if it's a documentary, you're still kind of squeezing it into some sort of story format. Yeah.
Well, if you look at something like Wife Swap, which was a heavily constructed program, they had if you were a director of that sort of thing, they gave you what they called the Bible or something like that, and that had exactly what needed to happen on day by day of Wife Swap. And that's what you had to film to. And if you didn't get it, you wouldn't be used again, kind of thing. And so I remember being asked by people working within that company, not for Wife Swap, but for another program. They said to me, you know, would you have a problem, you know, manipulating the truth and stitching people up and all that sort of stuff? And I was like, no, I would have a problem with that sort of thing. And so obviously I didn't get that job. But that's kind of the way that TV was going. And so that's why I left. So I left TV, and it was this film that brought me back into making films. And I much love doing.
Yeah.
To a way that works for TV.
I suppose that's the creative freedom. Then self-funding, it comes with a price, obviously. But it also comes with the freedom. Yeah,
I mean, self-funding's completely sustainable. I couldn't self-fund another one.
Say that again, sorry.
But this one, I couldn't self-fund another film. So I think that any film has to be pre-sold in some way. But with this one, I'd always wanted to make a film my way, and I'd always wanted to be proud of something that I'd done. And so this was just a passion project basically, and it was a one-off that for me, I'm just very lucky it's played out like it has, and that it's doing well and it's in the cinemas and that sort of stuff. I mean, that really is fantastic luck on your first film, really. So it's I've realised all my dreams on it, kind of thing, which is lucky. But the self-funding thing is a bit painful, really, on the whole.
Yeah, because is it right? 3 years in the making. Is that?
Yeah. And
that's
so that
a killer,
wasn't
like
3 years full time. It was sort of.
No, I know. I
it wasn't,
appreciate that.
And so there would be 6-month stints in there where we were hoping, we'd sent it off to the BBC or Channel 4 or something and said, do you want this? And they said, yeah, we'll look at it. And then it's about 6 months later, we've got everything on hold, waiting for them to say yes or no, so that we could proceed to the next step of editing or whatever it may be. And then during that time, if there was something interesting to film, I'd go out and film it. But we wouldn't be spending loads of money on editors and that sort of stuff. And then they came back and went, no, we're not going to do it now, or whatever. And so we just get on with it and do it ourselves. So yeah, it was a long project, but I was working in between, and that was what was paying for it. Basically, I had a small production company that was making promotional films for environmental and charitable organisations, and that and savings were what paid for it.
And can I ask then, so I kind of almost like, though, that it's been, if it was that period of time in terms of capturing, because obviously when you take, if you take a psychedelic in a country where it's legal, of course, but if you take, there's an afterglow period, and then I'm always curious about, well, what's the story 6 months after it's taken? 9 months, is there a relapse into, is the change dramatic? And what's your sense from the film? Obviously, there's so much you can give away, but give away as much as you can in terms of that.
So I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. It's certainly true that if I had stopped filming 6 months after the trial had finished, it would be a very different film to the film that it was. If I'd stopped filming maybe even a year after the trial had finished, it probably would have been a different film again. And then I stopped filming sort of 2 years after the trial, and then I think that is the film, because if I was to carry on filming, I wouldn't have got anything new, because the sort of results, they had ended their journey completely, the people who were on the trial. And the answer is that they all went through ups and downs. And at different points in the film, it was very positive, and then not so positive, and then it sort of ended as it ended. And I think that you've got to go through that journey watching the film to really get it. And so I'd be reticent to talk about it in any more detail than that.
Yeah, that's fine. And you just, I'll try and keep away from the juice, and we'll skirt around the juice. But I suppose I am very, in a way, that's what I'm most curious about, because I think I read.
But I think what's clear is that reintegration is critical.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that what's clear is that, or what's clear for me anyhow, is that. We need to do more trials to learn whether it's the drug that's doing it, whether it's the music that's doing it, whether it's the relationship with the psychologist and psychiatrist and team that's sort of doing it, or what combination of the three. And only more trials will tell us that, and whether a redose would have helped some of them, continue their good fortune. Or a stronger dose. All of these things need to be tested more methodically, but that obviously takes money, which none of these trials apart from Compass has.
Yeah. You see, my sense of it is that, you say you have a person that's suffering, and if these are untreatable, that's the people that that are in the film had untreatable depression. So that is. Now, I'm not even trying to imagine what untreatable. Some of them are 30 years or 8 years suffering.
It's just grim. Yeah, every single day, getting up knowing that you're feeling the lowest you've ever felt in your life, and probably more, every single day having to get up and survive in whatever way you can. And the three people survived in quite different ways, actually. It was sort of quite interesting exploring that with them. So yeah, I mean, untreatable is a bad word. In the film, Roz says, one of the psychologists says, you know, untreatable depression, that's a bad word, because that suggests that it's not possible to treat it, when in fact, actually just haven't found the right treatment yet.
Yes,
but, you know, if I was, from what I know about the guys that I film with, I can see why they might say that it was untreatable, because their lives were utterly, utterly painful. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
Yeah, in a way, maybe that is my sense of it is that this chemical, and I read one of your tweets that said something like, I don't think this should be totally legalized. I think Schedule 1 or something, that it should be declassified downwards. Is that right? And
to make researchers, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of because I think in the enthusiastic world of this, and it is, because it's so interesting, it is something you kind of look and go, you kind of go, wow, like you do go, you can apparently have from the outside magical results, and that you have this person who is locked tight in this kind of frame of thinking, and this chemical comes in and blows it open in a terrifying, even if there's, I imagine there is that terrifying thing that it blows it apart, and maybe when it comes back together, a little bit of light has got into the system, and that it seems like that. Now that person can probably come back together again fully. I don't know, but maybe there's always a little bit of light in there. But life is still, and so that's the magic of it. But it's like jumping out of an airplane. Get a parachute, get a good instructor if you're going to do it, and don't be an idiot about it. That's my sense looking in. But what the point I was going to make is this: there is a huge wave of enthusiasm, and I think rightly so. But I think also there has to be that balance of this isn't just going for a jog. This is dramatic.
Yeah. No, I think it is. And I think that, Robin talks about it being a snow globe, where you shake up a snow globe and your brain resettles in a slightly different way. And then the reintegration process allows that resettling to sort of solidify a little bit. And so if you've got good reintegration post these experiences, then that increases the chances of your sort of neural pathways staying light, to use your phrase, as opposed to going back into this habitual repetitive thought process of, I want to kill myself, or I'm worthless, or I'm ruining my family, or whatever it is that these guys all think. And I agree with you that it shows promise, but a trial of 20 patients is not something that can dictate policy, I think, at this stage. What I would say is that, or what I feel is that, if 50% of people aren't responding to antidepressants, and they're the only drugs out there, and they're not, responding to CBT and all that sort of stuff, then there's clearly a need for something. Yeah. And so the question is, if there really is a need for something, then why aren't people exploring with real vigor all of the opportunities that show promise? And that would be my strategy for this, would be to make it easier to do the research with psilocybin, so that lots of people can get involved and set up their own trials, testing slightly different things, sharing all that knowledge, finding out what works and what doesn't work, in the same way that cancer drugs are very, very targeted now. Every single person, it seems, receives a very slightly different type of cancer drug to help them specifically with their cancer. And so maybe it'd be the same with psilocybin, where, if you get 50 million patients with it, or sort of, 1 million patients with it, then you get a sense of what kind of dose. If someone comes to you, you can go, you are person A 0.4, and that means that you get this dose and this kind of therapy afterwards, and that we think will work best for you. but
Yeah.
that's a long way away. So we just need to make that research easier so that we can know that sort of information.
Yeah, and the problem is really as to why it's not loads of money is not being thrown into the investigation of it is because, unfortunately, there isn't money to be made. So, and it is
Compass Pathways, I think there is.
Compass Pathways.
Compass Pathways have raised 25 million, I think, for their trials, psilocybin trials for depression. Including Peter Thiel. He gave.
I did read about Peter Thiel.
10 million or something like that.
Okay.
So that they have clearly think that there's a money to be made here.
Do you think it's people outside of the
business,
outside the pharmaceutical?
Yeah, it's business people. Well, I mean,
entrepreneurs that maybe are coming from a different angle as opposed to established businesses that supply a Prozac sort of thing.
Or researchers? Yeah. So I think that there's been an interesting debate as to the difference between Compass Pathways approach and the researchers' approach. And basically, Compass Pathways have come in and they have been quite hard-nosed, as far as I can see from the outside. And I don't have great inside knowledge on this, but they've been quite hard-nosed and quite business-like about it. And the sort of more liberal, maybe, researchers are like, oh, that's capitalism. Not sure about that. Don't know quite how that's working with us, sort of thing, and getting a bit nervous about it. And I think only time will tell how Compass Pathways what Compass Pathways do, because they basically own psilocybin now in Europe, because they have manufactured psilocybin to medical grade quality. They're the only people that can do it, and because they spent so much money, I think they spent like £1.5 million or something pounds on getting it to this medical grade quality. And so the European Drug Agency, whatever that's called, said, okay, well, we'll give you a 10-year license for that sort of thing. And so how Compass Pathways wield that power will be really interesting to see in the coming years.
Can they really do that when I can, if I want to, I can go out and buy a grow kit?
Yeah, but you can do it yourself, of course, but you can't run a medical trial unless you've got something that is accurate down to the microgram. Okay. So psilocybin is that.
Powerful, I suppose. It does need to be. Yeah, if you are a big pharmaceutical, I mean, it's only hypothetical, but are they in the business of curing people? I don't know if they are in the business of curing people, but
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know enough to be sure, but my instinct tells me that it's all about money, which is sad.
Yeah, well, it is how it is, but yeah. And
if there's a cure for something along the way, then that's great. But as long as they're making their money, I don't think they mind too much.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, if there was a cure, that means the money would stop. But if I can get you on a monthly prescription for the rest of your life, that's just average order value per customer is a lot better. I mean, I would say that these pharmaceutical companies are spending a lot of money on getting these drugs to market, and so there is a need for them to survive. To make money off the ones that are approved. And as I understand it, it's becoming harder and harder to get drugs past. Well, in fact, they've stopped making antidepressants because when they got, I think it's stage 3 of the drug approval process is the sort of against the placebo, and they just kept on falling over against the placebo. And so they spent £500,000 or whatever it is on creating this new antidepressant, and they just, it just wasn't working, kind of thing. They couldn't prove that it was better than placebo. And so, as I understand it, all these pharmaceutical companies have just stopped making antidepressants, and then all the antidepressants that they made all their money from in years gone by are now out of patent. And so they're not making any money on those either. And so it's just new companies reformulating what they've done, and so they're selling them for pence, That's extraordinary what you just said, that the placebo performed better.
Yeah, well,
or the same, or more or less.
Their drug didn't
show
didn't show such notable difference against the placebo that that it kind of the drug enforcement agencies or whoever it was said, well,
But that's not widely known. Is that widely known, that particular statement that you... I find that extraordinary.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I would fact check that as well, but that's what I was told by, it would have been someone like David Nutt or whatever. I wouldn't repeat it if it was sort of my mate John down the pub. So I think that's kind of why. I think that there haven't really been any new antidepressants brought out into the market for a long time now, and that's because they're really expensive to do the research on, and not a lot of them were falling through, and so they were losing millions and millions of pounds in the research, and they just thought, well, let's go on to Viagra or a drug for Parkinson's or whatever, because that's going to make us more money anyhow. So I think that they basically stopped doing research into depression, and that's why actually no one really knows why depression happens and that sort of stuff. We don't even know that, so that's difficult to treat.
Okay, I can see how Compass Pathways, what you've said there, how there is a business in it. I mean, there's a business in cannabis, a humongous business in cannabis worldwide. Yeah. So they surely can make a business out of this. And why not let them make a business if they invest in it and it actually does a little bit of something for people?
Well, exactly. And that's the question is what are Compass Pathways? What are their motivations? And are they in it for the good of themselves or the good of treating, or getting this treatment as widely researched as possible? I did something about and again, this is secondhand information, so it could be nothing, but I did something about them only allowing people to use their psilocybin if they followed their trial procedures, which means that essentially there's only one trial happening over and over and over again. And that to me seems totally, surely you should be experimenting with all sorts of different types of trials so that you get a sort of see what works in some situations and what works in others, and maybe marry the two for the third trial, and that's how you learn, it seems to me. But to be doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, that seems completely farcical. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what I've been told.
But you'd imagine something like this is not, psilocybin is not, whilst it's as containable as it can be, the scene and setting and the dose and all that, the reaction to the person is not holistically predictable. It's not, given that person's history and that person's life, it does blow, whatever way it's taken, they can try and control it in whatever way, but still when it goes inside the body of the person, maybe, did you see that? I'm guessing, but from the various people taking it throughout the movie, was there dramatically different reactions to it, or the same? There was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, it was interesting in our film. It was they all went to a pretty dark place, and so none of them had the one of them had a sort of momentary blissful experience kind of thing, but they all went to a pretty dark place basically. Whereas in the trial more generally, some people in the trial went to a completely blissful place and sort of met God and that sort of stuff. And so our film, unfortunately, just because of the fact that we were filming the only people that said yes, slightly sort of distorts the fact, but it's good in a way. I think it's good because it gives you a completely different perspective on what psilocybin is, and so the film really doesn't pull any punches, and it is a hard watch. And if you want to sort of learn about depression, then it's a good film to watch, because you get a real sense of what it is like to live with this thing. And then you've got this wonderful sort of psychedelic angle to the film to take you through all of that sense of what living with depression is like, both from the patient's point of view and also their families.
Okay.
But yeah, but even within the 3 that I filmed, they were sort of quite different reactions. So one person was very vocal during the trip. Another one basically didn't say anything, but wanted to leave because he was seeing weird things that he didn't want to see. And then finally, the last one said that it didn't have any effect on him at all to the people running the trial. But then to me in the film, he was like, yeah, I saw a major amount of weirdness, but nothing that told me what my illness was about, kind of thing. So I think that he was kind of searching for a cure and maybe that wasn't the right. It's so difficult with him. I don't know what his story is, and I don't know. I feel very particularly sad for him. Every day he's like completely flat. He doesn't feel any joy. He doesn't feel any emotions whatsoever. He's just completely flat. But he doesn't just sit in his room all day and do nothing. He gets up and he walks the dog, and he does some gardening, and he does all the things that you're told to do to try and get better. He lives in the countryside, so he goes for walks, in woodlands and stuff like that, connecting with nature, but none of it's doing anything for him. Every single day he's just completely flat at the bottom of the emotional spectrum.
Wow.
And I don't know how long. I mean, he had that, so he's 40 something, and he's had it since he was 16, and so that's like 25 years or something like that of basically, not feeling anything.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know whether I would be alive after 25 years of that. I think it would just be so heartbreaking and miserable that you would just think, actually, surely suicide is a better option than living like this every single day for the rest of my life. So I feel very, I feel very, I'm trying to make it not sound patronizing, but I just feel incredible emotional sadness for the 3 people that I was filming. And I just do not see a solution for them, but they were given this glimmer of hope that you talked about earlier on. During this trial, they were, well, certainly 2 out of the 3 were really definitely given a real glimmer of hope for the first time in, at least a decade for both of them. And then that raises its own questions of sort of, well, is it fair to open up that sort of hope to people and then to have it know that it's going to be taken away, or to have a strong sense that it's going to be taken away and there's nothing you can do about it? And, the infrastructure in their hometowns is never going to be able to give them the best follow-up that they need. One of them lives in Dumfries, in the borders of Scotland. With the best will in the world, the sort of local mental health provider that won't know much about psilocybin and there won't be a lot of people on offer who can do reintegration therapy with him and, get him back on track. And the NHS certainly won't pay for it anyhow. So, that does present problems.
Yeah, I mean, you see, my nature is almost, to fix. I think it's a lot of men are like that kind of. You should be able to fix this. You should be able to do this, this, and this, and then you go, no, that's not working. And well, you should be able to do this, and that's not working. And then you go, right, well, he needs to just take the biggest dose ever, and then you go, well, maybe it's a dose thing. I don't know. I mean, because that was my thing as well. That you see, life is life. First of all. There's no antidote for life. Life is life. But it's easy to say that, but life is life, and life can be horrendous and life can be spectacular, but there is no antidote for, that. But the thing like a psychedelic can give you this openness, or can open up possibilities, and then they close again. Like even for people who've got, say, peak experiences, blissful experiences, almost that is kind of like, seeing God and then it's taken away from you. But maybe there's that left inside you that, you're left with that, that touching you. But then in a way for them, they're almost showing something worse. Is this true? Worse than, because that's, sorry, where I'm going with this is that, say through therapy and CBT, people are kind of can float around the truth of themselves. They can, I can be here and I'm not going to change, and these are my problems way over here. But with the psilocybin, there's no escaping. It's you are slam banged presented with the stark reality of everything.
Or this blissful, wonderful reality.
This blissful, yeah.
And that is it. I mean, basically, I think Ros in the trial said that, they went to places in one dose, in 6 hours that you wouldn't get to with 10 years of CBT. Because if the person doesn't want to talk about this stuff or doesn't realize the relevance of those childhood experiences, for example, or the significance of those childhood experiences, they just won't go there. And if they've been burying these memories for their whole teen and adult life, then that's going to take an incredible amount of trust and digging from with an individual to get that sort of out. And the NHS just simply can't afford to do that. So their sessions, as like Ros was saying, that it's so frustrating working as a psychologist within the NHS, because you get these people who come in who've got massive mental health issues, and you've got 10 sessions with them once a week. And Ros was like, and so basically what we used to do is we didn't even bother trying to approach the real proper mental health problem. What we tried to do within those 10 sessions is, in the first 5, gain their trust, and in the next 5, find something that we could solve in 5 sessions, like, they might not like taking buses, which stops them from being able to go to work or something like that. And so they spend 5 sessions trying to get them to feel better about going on a bus. And that's obviously, that's a leaf on a tree of mental health, but that's a win, as opposed to just them leaving after 10 sessions with nothing, basically. Whereas something like this, they like you say, they unavoidably have to deal with what is presented to them. And if they look away and look somewhere else in their mind, the thing reveals itself in a slightly different way over here, and then over here, and then over there, and whatever, until basically they get so tired that they go, okay, fine, open up this box of terrors and let's see what's in it.
Yeah, box of terrors is an interesting way to describe it. And I almost think that you've heard of ayahuasca, have you? So that in Peru and these places, say the true shamans who have been using this, has been passed on for, let's say that the true shamans, as opposed to guys who are trying to pretend to be these shamans, but that is in the indigenous, in the forests. I imagine they have mastered it, not mastered it, but they've realized, well, it's not just one session, it's 5 sessions, and it's over a period of time, and it's a real and learning from that. Going out into the forest to talk to these people, to really, really study, because ayahuasca and psilocybin, they all have apparently similar sort of traits. But say centuries ago, if you were living there and you had some sort of a problem, you'd go to the shaman, and he'd give you this medicine, and he'd talk to you and nurse you back, and in a caring, whatever way. And there probably would be dramatic results for existential crises, as opposed to it must be frustrating for the likes of Robin that they get to do it once or twice, that they don't have a huge, given their enthusiasm, they don't have a huge budget to just do this in the best possible way. Because it just sounds like that the people that you dealt with didn't get loads and loads of treatments. It's a certain amount, limited to the trial.
No, exactly. So they're basically, that they are restricted by what the trial has been given permission to do. And so Robin and David and whoever else was involved at that process would design a trial. They would take it to the ethics committee, and whoever else has to get through the regulatory hoops of all this sort of thing. And they say, okay, this is what we want to do. And so the ethics committee and co say, fine, there's your rubber stamp for that trial that you have talked to us about. And so if halfway through the trial they realize, oh shit, you know, we should have got a lot more integration, or, you know, actually a lot of these people need another dose. Well, that's just tough luck, basically. That's not the trial that they've got permission for, and so they have to wait for the next one, and then you know, put what they've learned into that from that first trial into the second trial. And so in an ideal world, they would just say, okay, we want to do a trial with psilocybin, and we want to just mess around and do whatever we think works, but no ethics committee in the world is going to allow them to do that.
No, of course not. No.
I thought what was really interesting. I heard an interview with a guy called, I think, Jamie Wheel, and he was saying that in those in the, you know, South American ayahuasca ceremonies or whatever it is, all those committees, they sort of treat these drugs with, you know, a lot more respect, kind of thing, maybe.
A lot more. Say that again. A lot more
respect.
Yeah.
And so what he would say is that they would, you know, you wouldn't just launch yourself into ayahuasca or psilocybin or whatever it is. You would start with, you know, a drug that was less potent, and once you had learned the lessons from that drug and sort of educated in that drug, then you could move to the next one. And then that's kind of what happens until you get to ayahuasca, which is, you know, the most potent or whatever it is. And maybe there's one that's even more potent, sort of thing. But I really like that idea. I really like the idea of earning the right to take these drugs, and going through a process to learn about yourself and the world that we live in and all that sort of stuff, before just sort of taking it for fun or hedonistically, which is what a lot of Westerners did. You know,
because it is that word, though, respect, because, I mean, normally it is a lesson, and either the lessons are learned or they're not. Like, I mean, I spoke to somebody once who'd taken ayahuasca 100 times, and I went, why 100 times? Like, why do you keep it? Is the lesson not, are you still trying to improve to get to this magical place, or, you know, or have you actually taken, if you have had the experience of ayahuasca and you know, got, or even paid attention to what it's telling you, you'd imagine, and paid attention to what it is telling you, sounds a bit out there.
No,
but there is
an intelligence to it.
There is, yeah.
I think that's an interesting thought for me, and that's an unanswered question for me, is that, you know, if you have taken it 100 times, then why are you taking it, and why aren't you fixed? And if you're not fixed, in inverted commas, then maybe it doesn't work. And so that is an interesting thought for me, I mean, I saw incredible promise with psilocybin, but exactly that sort of story makes me wonder, well, there are clearly people out there who have taken a lot of these drugs. I mean, Amanda Fielding, she came to the premiere of our film, and she was saying that, you know, she's taken loads of these drugs in her time, and she still, you know, suffers a little bit from low moods and depression, and sort of hasn't seen the light and that sort of stuff. And so it you know, that there's evidence that it doesn't work.
Well, and you see, I would be kind of,
as in doesn't fix people. But then, having said that, there are 2 people on the trial out of the 20 who had 1 dose of psilocybin, and they are completely fixed. They are depression free to this day.
I would say that there's no, in my mind, having experienced ayahuasca, and you kind of mentioned about a lead up, I've experienced ayahuasca, and so my whole sense of anything is, if I was going to have to do it more than once, then it's another game, it's another seeking to get to an imaginary place. And I kind of just stumbled upon it, and I was really curious about it. But the idea that this is the same idea as in this seeking this 21st, this world we live in, is I need to get to this place and then I'll be at peace. So the next time I take this thing, then I'll be fine. And I just think that's bullshit, though. you know, that's you there now. You've an imaginary place in mind, and it needs to fit. Your vision of the world needs to fit that imaginary place, because if it doesn't, then you're not there yet. So I'm going to take this again and again. But I have no. So sorry. My roundabout point is that I think the substances for the right type of person, can have a dramatic effect. But you're taking something from nature that is, and you can try and manage it as best you possibly can, and you know, make it the dose perfect, but you're still taking something from nature that has a wildness to it. So I do think there's something in that, in the right circumstances, in the right therapeutic environment, in a respectful way, once every whenever. But this thing of, I have a creative problem in Silicon Valley and I'm just going to take a little dose of LSD just to fix the problem so I can perform well at work. I mean, that's fine. I just don't think that's what it's for. You know, but that's the nature of us almost. We take everything and fucking just abuse it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's that intention and motivation, which is clearly very important when you're going into using these sort of things, which is why there's obviously a lot of preparation in advance.
Yes.
You know, as part of a trial, there's, you know, they speak to them at length about what they might experience and what sort of things they might think come up and that sort of stuff, so that they go into this sort of thing in the best possible frame of mind.
Okay, very good. Tell me about the film. You see, obviously the film is shown, it's in certain places in the UK, there's screenings.
Yeah, so there's, I can't remember how many screenings there have been now, but they've all sold out apart from one, which is amazing, given that we haven't got any budget whatsoever for advertising. So it's all basically through word of mouth. I mean, I'm on Twitter, but I started unbelievably naively and stupidly. I started being on Twitter a week before the premiere. So, I mean, it's the first film I've made. So I honestly thought that when the film was finished, that was my job done. I literally had no idea that it was really actually just the beginning. And so now, it's been in the cinemas in the UK. So maybe there are 20 screenings or something like that. Some cinemas have rebooked because it did so well, which is really wonderful for me to hear. I love hearing that sort of thing. I love having people come up to me an hour after a screening in the bar afterwards and just say, you know, I just thought that was a great film. We've just spent the last hour talking about the film. That for me is the biggest compliment that anyone could give a filmmaker. So that's lovely and completely unexpected feedback. And then we've now been given a bit of money by a private investor, and we I think that the strategy behind that, and it was only about a week ago that this all happened, so we're still sort of working on it, but I think the strategy behind that will be to try and get it seen in Parliament, and that won't just be sort of booking a room and hoping someone turns up. There'll be a sort of quite thought through, tailored sort of piece that will target certain MPs who are influential or interested in this kind of area and try and get them there to see it. And they won't see the whole film because they haven't got time for that. So maybe they'll see a 20-minute film and there'll be a question and answer afterwards or something like that, with the hope of starting this conversation to make research easier.
Wow.
It would be good to try and get some mental health organisations involved in that as well. So I've been speaking to a lot of the mental health organisations during the whole filming process to try and get them on board. A lot of them came to a screening, a couple of months before the actual premiere, to get their take on it and see whether that's something they want to do. And we're still in discussions with them. And it would be wonderful to be part of a campaign that one of them is running. So we're just rolling it out essentially. The first thing was the cinema screenings, and then there'll be private screenings, within organisations or within Parliament or wherever it is, and then maybe someone wants to sort of run a campaign in which part of the film becomes part of a campaign, and then sort of we just extend the life of the film in that way and just try and get it seen by as many people as possible over the lifetime of the film, and that's not for monetary gain. I think that's that's been forgotten about now. I think that this feels to me like it's a film that people really kind of need to see, both so that they can learn about how awful depression is, but also the potential of these new drugs, and just to raise public education on these things, that they're not dangerous hedonistic drugs that make you jump off buildings, although they can be. They can also be, in the right environment, incredible tools to help people that otherwise don't have any hope.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's really cool. I mean, all of that happening. I mean, I imagine that can be, if you weren't expecting that promotional side of it, would be quite tough. But also, it's pretty cool with that possibility that your films to do something that could have an impact like that is quite nice.
Yeah. I mean, I think there aren't many things that I've been really proud of in my life, sort of thing. I'm quite tough on myself in that way.
Yeah.
But this is something that I really, every time I watch it, I think, oh, that's a really bloody good film. And everyone that has seen it has been really positive about it. Well, I mean, people who thought it was crap haven't come up to me and said I thought it was crap. So maybe there are people that thought it was crap. But most people that I know have come up to me and just said, I was very moved by that, and it was a very, very good film, and that's a wonderful thing in its own. And so if that's all that happens, that's kind of good for me. But it would be lovely for it to have some sort of, it feels to me like it could have a catalytic, if that's a word, effect on this world. And if that's the case, that would be wonderful and completely unexpected.
Yeah, at the start of my little short piece, Robin, I've his quote. Robin said something like, "If this takes off, it could change the world," and I think that about what you're doing with this film. I think it's not really to change the world, to change certain elements of it, and maybe things like maybe if it. I think at a minimum, if it can bring awareness, and people who are like me in the past going, it's one way, and go, oh, I didn't know that. I think that's kind of really, it's really interesting to know that these substances can have such an impact. I mean, it has to be,
yeah. It's a challenging film in that way. It does make you sit up and rethink a lot of preconceptions that you may have had, both about depression and psychedelics, and that is a good thing. I mean, obviously, our motivation when we went into the film was just, well, let's see what happens, kind of thing. And only, I mean, to some extent, only off the back of the screenings that happened in the few weeks that I was in London for the premiere and around it, only off the back of that have we thought, wow, people really have responded positively to this. And maybe it would be morally wrong to not try and make the most of it, and capitalize on a wave or a bump that it has come our way.
Yeah, I think the timing is very right for it. It feels right, and also just the swell when you see mainstream. See the recent development in the US with the FDA and psilocybin, and just there is a bit of a groundswell in terms of the media publicity of it. That's the timing could be very right for it. Who knows? I mean, it's very interesting the reaction you're getting. It's great to hear. I'm delighted for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very cool, man. Listen, thank you so much for giving me your time. It's a Friday night. Hi, if you like the conversation that I just had and you'd like more, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you.
Frank, come on, man.